Hi, this is Gail Sokol, and on today's show, we're going to be discussing how to lighten things up.
Welcome to Baking Radio. Learn the art and science of baking with author, educator, and award-winning chef, Gail Sokol. Whether you've been baking your whole life or you're brand new to the world of baking and you're looking to build your confidence and learn new skills in the kitchen, you're in the right place. This is Baking Radio.
So today we're going to talk about how to lighten things up, how to make those incredible baked goods a little lighter, maybe a little healthier. So we love our cakes, our cookies, our scones, muffins, breads, all baked goods. We love them, but we also have to hopefully eat them in moderation. And some of us are successful at that and some are not. So baked goods are not always as healthy as they could be. And with all the saturated fat in them, the sugar, the refined grains, high calories, obesity is an issue that we all have to worry about. So eating in moderation is the key. And I love making baked goods. But when I feel my family's overindulging, I love to put a healthier spin on some of my favorite baked goods. And it actually takes the edge off a little bit, and you don't feel so guilty, and they don't feel so guilty indulging. The problem is there's a science to doing this, and it's not as easy as it looks, but I'm going to demystify it for you a little bit. So I've mentioned in other shows that there's really a science to baking, even more so than cooking. Each and every ingredient plays an important role in creating the specific texture, mouthfeel, everything for that baked good. Not all recipes can be lightened up. I will warn you, not all recipes can be lightened up because for some, changing ingredients won't work. And it changes the taste and texture of the baked good so much and makes it so extremely different. It's not worth eating. It's not worth my time. It's not worth your time. So the goal is, if we can swap out some healthier ingredients for not so healthy ingredients and make it taste just as high quality as the original baked good, I'm in. But if there's any compromising, forget it. All bets are off, right? Okay, so we're in it together. We're going to learn how to do this, and it's going to taste good, or we're not going to do it at all. So the purpose here is most certainly not to create an inferior baked good, but we want it to make it a little better for you. It may be a little different, but it's going to be as close as possible to the original. That's my promise to you. So first, I look at the recipe if I want to see if something is worthy and worthwhile making it a little lighter. I always look at the amount of fat that's used and also what form it takes. So when I was writing my first book about professional baking, I have a whole chapter on healthier baking. And that's the first thing I always used to do is look at the fat. Oh my gosh, there's a pound of butter in that. Oh my goodness, there's 1 cup of oil in that. That's a lot of fat. And fat is 9 calories a gram. That's our most nutrient-dense thing that we eat during the day. So we have to be careful. So, and is it all good fat? Not always. So we have to sort of watch our P's and Q's. So let's say I want to make a brownie recipe and the fat is melted along with the chocolate. Can I use a healthier fat? What could I use? So the answer to that, the short answer is yes, I can use a healthier fat if I'm melting. Typical brownie recipe melts chocolate, chopped chocolate with some form of butter, usually unsalted butter. I can swap out that unsalted butter with oil, a neutral oil, a mono unsaturated oil like canola oil. It will be healthier because monounsaturated oil is a better for your heart oil than something like a saturated butter. I can also use a light butter, quote unquote, light butter. So that type of butter you'd have to search for in the grocery store, and they're there. There's plenty of options. Not a margarine, but a light butter. that doesn't contain any gums or gelatins or a lot of water-based ingredients that'll melt down to nothing. You want to be able to bake with it. Now, these healthier butters don't always melt well and play well with chocolate. So that doesn't discourage me. Oh no, I'm still going to be a go-getter with this. So I decided it was actually um, making my chocolate sort of seize up. And we've had chocolate shows in the past. Matter of fact, we had a series on chocolate. So if you want to listen to what seizing of chocolate is, and it's not pretty, you can listen to one of those shows. But in order to prevent seizing, you don't want to add a water-based light butter directly to chocolate unless it's fully fatted butter. So I will melt it separately and then add it once the chocolate's already in with the other ingredients. Then I can add it to that brownie recipe and it works beautifully. So it's not a problem. So I usually like this light butter, which is half the saturated fat of unsalted butter. You can actually save half fat calories by using a lighter butter. But again, search around the grocery store. So I will use 4 tablespoons of regular butter, and I can use 4 tablespoons of light butter. If you don't want to go all light butter, you can do half and half. That would work nicely as well. Again, add your light butter later on when your other ingredients are being added. Don't add it directly to the chocolate. This not only decreases the saturated fat, it also decreases the total calories as well. Now, back up a little bit. If you wanted to say, I need 8 tablespoons of butter melted with my chocolate for my brownie recipe, and you want to swap out oil, a neutral oil that won't have a flavor, like canola oil or vegetable oil, you could do it. Will that save on fat calories? No. You will still get the same amount of calories. So no savings there, but you will be eating a healthier oil. So it's your decision whether you want to swap out and do a light butter or you want to do a different type of fat, an oil, a liquid fat that's a little healthier for you, and then no calorie difference whatsoever as the original. So that's up to you. I've done both. So you want, again, make sure that this light butter has no gelatins or gums in it. And another way to cut back on calories is using, like I said, this healthier fat. And sometimes you can use things like apple butter, apple sauce, and you can use up to half the fat. So if you have 8 tablespoons of butter in a recipe, you can successfully use, let's say, 4 tablespoons of applesauce and then 4 tablespoons of butter. So you're substituting half applesauce and half butter instead of all butter. That usually works very well in a recipe. It may not work very well in a brownie recipe, may change the texture too much. Would it work in a chocolate cake? Yes, it would work beautifully in a chocolate cake. Matter of fact, in a chocolate cake, I have used, get this, pureed sweet potato. I have used pureed carrots in a chocolate cake recipe, and you would never know it. I could fool you. So basically, I would use, if a recipe used 2 sticks of butter in a chocolate cake recipe, I would use half a cup, because 1 stick of butter is worth 8 tablespoons or half a cup. I would take half a cup of my pureed sweet potato, and I would add that to 1 stick of butter, and I would cut back on my calories 50%. It works really well. Would I use it for a yellow cake or a white cake? No, because it's going to be orange. And, people may suspect something is a little off about your yellow cake or your white cake. So I am very famous for my blind chocolate cake taste test for my students when I teach them how to lighten up baked goods. So I make my delicious original chocolate cake, which has half a pound of butter in the original. And then I make the lightened version with either the applesauce or the sweet potato. And I put them side by side, no frosting, no confectioner sugar, nothing. Is just cake on cake, cake to cake, mano a mano. And Then I cut a piece of each one for them. It's a blind taste test. They don't know which one is which. And I usually fool over 50% of the class. They don't know which one's which. And if they were given the light version, they would think it was amazing. So you really can shake things up a little bit and make them healthier. Other fruits and vegetables can also be used. Like I said before, pureed carrots. Some people use baby food. Stage 1 only, please. You don't want any chunks in there. But stage 1, like very pureed carrots, or so you wouldn't want to use peas or anything like that, but sweet potatoes or carrots are pretty neutral. They have a sweet flavor to them, or pureed or applesauce, something like that, pureed apples. But I'd like to make my own sweet potato because it's got a little bit more fiber and nutrition in it than the strained baby food. Some people also use things like pureed black beans or white beans, and I've used those in brownie recipes. So when my family heard that I had pureed black beans and put them in a recipe, it was like, few 4-letter words, no, we're not doing it. We're not going to eat them. And they were very good, but it depends. The one item that I did try to use as a fat replacement was avocado, right? Avocado is a fabulous, healthy fat, monounsaturated fat, great for your heart. Well, I pureed an avocado, put it in for up to half the fat into brownies because I am a brownie aficionado, and it tasted terrible. Even I would admit those brownies were not good. The avocado brownie was not good. So if anyone's got a secret with avocado brownie, please write in to bakingradio.com and leave me a message because I would love to know how to make it taste good, but it did not. So that's substituting fat. You have some options there. Next, we're going to try to substitute some whole grain for the refined flour. So most recipes for baking use cake flour or all-purpose flour. And we know we are supposed to eat a certain amount of grains for the day. Half of those grains are supposed to be whole. So they're supposed to be whole grain. That means that the flour, whatever type it is, it should have been from the entire grain. So if it's from the wheat plant, it should be the germ, the endosperm, and the bran. We're supposed to eat all types. So like whole wheat flour is the germ, the endosperm, and the bran, all three parts of that wheat plant, that wheat kernel, if you will. Now, some of us don't like the wheaty taste in white cakes and yellow cakes, and there is a place for it. I will tell you, whole wheat flour works very nicely in certain things. In my heirloom tomato tart, I use some whole wheat flour in there, and it's fabulous. It gives a little bit of a nutty crunch to the crust, and it gives some heartiness to it, and it's wholesome. It actually is healthy for you. So let's talk about the different parts of a kernel, whether it's a kernel of wheat or a whole grain of something. We talked about the germ, we talked about the endosperm and the bran, but what are they? So picture this football-shaped wheat kernel or kernel of whatever it is. It could be a grain of rice, it could be oats, it could be anything, but it's the whole kernel. The center part is known as the germ. This is the part of the kernel that contains the fat, and it's the regenerating part. This is the part that where the plant regenerates itself. The germ also contains, like I said, all the fat, but along with the fat, a lot of vitamins and minerals are in there as well. The endosperm, that's the inside next to the germ, and that is where most flour comes from. So if you buy white flour, like all-purpose flour or bread flour, it will have the germ and the bran removed. It's gone. Endosperm is 100% endosperm is all-purpose flour, and that's it. So you get rid of all that nutrition because the germ has lots of vitamins and minerals in it, and the bran is the outside. So there's a hull that is removed. You can't eat that. And then there's the bran. There's sort of a brownish outside to it. That has tons of vitamins and minerals to it. It's very, very healthy. And that's what gives whole wheat flour that slight creamy color, that slight brownish color. So that is something that you really want to ingest a lot of whole grains. So when I want to switch out white flour for something a little healthier, you gotta sort of have a little tete-a-tete with your family, a little powwow with your family, and find out how much they can handle. Okay. My family told me right out when I made cinnamon rolls, yeasted cinnamon rolls, I made cinnamon rolls and I put half whole wheat flour, half white flour, and my family was okay with that. Then I went a step further and I added all whole wheat flour, and my family was like, whoa, no, 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 no. This doesn't taste as good. This doesn't taste like the original. No more. Half is as far as you go. And I listened, and that's as far as I can go. So, what I recommend if you don't know what your family's really into, you will have to see what their tolerance is. So, start small. Okay. Don't go for the gusto right away. Be very, very conservative. So, what I would do is if you make, let's say, a chocolate chip cookie recipe, very, sort of a generic chocolate chip cookie recipe, or an oatmeal cookie or a peanut butter cookie, replacing half the white flour, the all purpose flour, with whole wheat flour would be wonderful. It would work nicely. It would add a great texture, a little nutty quality to the taste. They may not even be able to tell. If you wanted to even add 1/4, so if you had, maybe 2 cups of all purpose flour, try using only half a cup of white whole wheat flour or regular whole wheat flour. So there's a white whole wheat flour, which is a healthy whole wheat flour. It's just a different type of a grain. It's a lighter grain. It's a less weedy flavor. So you can find that in the grocery store as well next to the whole wheat flour. And it's fabulous. So it would go very, very nicely. I find peanut butter cookies, anything where it has a little of a nuttiness to it, chocolate chips and brown sugar, that combination would go very nicely with a wheatier taste of whole wheat flour. So taste it and see. Give it to your family, half and half. Don't tell them. Maybe even take some of your original, freeze a few of them, and then let them have a blind taste test after. Have some fun with it. Have some fun with your family and experiment. But it is a very experiential type of a thing. You have to experience the flavor. Each family's different. What one family can tolerate, another family's like, nope, cannot handle it. And experiment with different flours too. So ground oats, okay, cornmeal, wheat germs, soy flour, buckwheat, spelt, rye flour. There's all different flours on the market that you can try. Remember, if you take out a lot of flour that comes from the wheat plant, remember, wheat flour forms gluten, has gluten-forming proteins, and you're replacing it with a non-gluten-forming flour, let's say like oat flour or something like a coconut flour, you are not going to have as much structure. So you may have to add more eggs. You may have to finagle with that recipe, which was previously balanced. Most recipes that are published are balanced. They work, and for the most part, they will make the same thing each time in consistency and texture and structure each and every time if you follow the directions. So use your judgment. If you want to start super conservatively, I recommend that you start by removing, like I said before, 1/4 of the flour, replace it with whole grain flour. I would say whole wheat would be your best option at this point. And my kids, like I said, let me know when I went too far. And that's what I would do. Now remember, there's other flours, things that are called flours: almond flour, hazelnut flour, coconut flour we talked about a few seconds ago. These do not contain gluten-forming proteins, so again, the structure may suffer. Coconut flour is like the newest thing. It's a very big trend now. It has fiber in it. It's low in digestible carbs. It's made from ground dried coconut, but there's no gluten in it. So remember, you will have to adjust the other ingredients, and it will be something you will have to see. The one ingredient that will give a lot of structure to your baked goods are eggs. Eggs have protein in them, and they will form structure. So that's why a lot of gluten-free baked goods have a lot of eggs in them, but make sure that the recipe is adjusted accordingly. All right, so let's replace or talk about replacing sugar. In my opinion, replacing sugar is one of the most difficult things to do as a baker. So, most sugar substitutes, and there are a gazillion out there, they do not behave like sugar. Sugar, I'm talking about granulated sugar, chemically known as sucrose. When you mix them, cream them with butter, like our creaming method of mixing for cakes and cookies. When you cream the butter and the sugar acts like sandpaper and forces air into the butter and helps to leaven the product along with the chemical leaveners, doesn't behave the same way. It doesn't brown like real sugar, these sugar substitutes. Sugar substitutes are an entirely different animal. Be careful. Some sugar substitutes will say, they will claim 1-to-1 ratio. So if you use 1 cup of sugar, granulated sugar in a recipe, you can use 1 cup of the sugar substitute. Not always true, because it's not going to be an acceptable baked good to you afterwards. It's going to look different. So I have an experiment that I do at the end of the year with my college students. We take a recipe for chocolate cake and we sort of mess with the ingredients. So one of them is we take all the sugar out and we put in a sugar substitute, different sugar substitutes. And they come out looking like the surface of Mars. They're flat. They don't rise properly. They are crumbled, dry, crumbly, and have a very bad aftertaste, many of them. So some sugar substitutes you have to try. I didn't say all sugar substitutes are bad. I just said you have to experiment. And it's something. Sugar substitutes are out there to help save some calories. Also, you see them as low sugar to decrease calories and sugar content for people that have diabetes. So in my opinion, taste can suffer if you're not careful. Some of the sugar sweeteners on the market, artificial sweeteners, are controversial because they're artificial. Some are more natural. Many sugar-free baked goods contain what's known as sugar alcohols or alcohol sugars. And these are not true carbohydrates like a sugar is a carbohydrate, but they're modified versions of them. They're used in gums like the chewing gum and hard candies and processed baked goods. So a lot of low sugar baked goods, especially for diabetics, will use sugar substitutes. And a lot of them will use a combination of sugar substitutes, some of which contain sugar alcohols. Now, how do you know what a sugar alcohol is? So I'm going to give you a little quick lesson. So some sugar alcohols that you may be familiar with, we've all heard of things like xylitol, mannitol, sorbitol. They typically end in an OL. So if you look at the ingredient list of whatever you're purchasing and you want to see if that sugar substitute has a sugar alcohol in it, you can see if it ends in an OL, it is a sugar alcohol. So that's one easy thing. Now, one sugar alcohol that I've had really good luck with baking is called Maltitol. It actually creams beautifully with butter. It helps cakes brown nicely. I have had the best luck with it. And I have tried it on all sorts of friends and family. They love it. They think it's wonderful. When I was researching my healthier baking chapter of my first book about professional baking, I bought some online, and you can purchase it online. It's not something I think you can buy in the grocery store. I've never seen it in the grocery store, like some of the artificial sweeteners that you can buy. And it can come in a granular state like sugar. It can also come in a liquid state if you ever just want to put some in your coffee. Now, one caveat with sugar alcohols. If you eat too many of them, they don't get digested very well. So they're going to go right to your intestines and they're going to possibly give you some digestive upset if you eat too many. One serving of them, you're fine. If you're making a slice of chocolate cake and they have them in them, that's fine. But if you overindulge and eat the entire cake, you may have some gastric upset. That's all I will say. Sugar alcohols in general, if you overindulge, can cause some issues. So again, my best advice with your recipe, see if you can cut back on the amount of regular sucrose. Most recipes, in my opinion, have way too much sugar. They don't need that much sugar. You could probably cut back a quarter of the sugar, the total. So if you have a recipe that has 1 cup of sugar in it, granulated sucrose, granulated sugar, use 3/4 of a cup. And I guarantee it'll almost be the same exact beautiful recipe, and you've cut back on the sugar. If you really want to use a sugar substitute, experiment. There may be some on the market that you might like. Now, my one piece of advice that I've had good luck with is if you are just wanting to sweeten something, if you want to make an apple pie filling or a blueberry pie filling and you just want to sweeten the blueberries, using one of these artificial sweeteners works beautifully. It will work beautifully because all you're doing is sweetening. That's the purpose of it. But if you're trying to caramelize, if you're trying to cream sugar and butter, if you're trying to use it to help with, making an egg foam and you want to make a meringue and you want to add sugar to the egg whites, it's not going to help foam your egg whites. It's not going to work. I just remind you, it's not going to work. So if you're just going to sweeten something, you're making applesauce, you're making a fruit pie filling, or just wanting to mix it in with your strawberries for a strawberry filling or sauce, it'll work beautifully. Any artificial sweetener. All right, so that is my one caveat for sugar substitutes. Again, experiment. See what works for you and your family. I have had some people actually use sugar substitutes or artificial sweeteners and their family doesn't mind them. They're controversial at times. Take a look, do experimentation on your own and see what you think. Let's talk about another last point that I want to make is using lower fat versions of things like dairy products. So you may have a recipe that says whole milk, or whole milk yogurt, or sour cream, fully fatted sour cream. I have really had huge success with using lower fat versions of yogurts or sour cream in a cake recipe, even if the recipe states, whole milk. I've used lactose-free milk, people that have a lactose problem. I've used lactate milk or almond milk or different types of milks, and they work beautifully. So you can lighten up a recipe with using lower fat versions of dairy products. I made a beautiful pound cake with skim milk, light butter, and half applesauce, and it's beautiful. No one can tell the difference. It's fabulous. You just want to make sure you know the role that each ingredient plays in your recipe. So, again, experiment. Baking should be enjoyed by everyone, but you can lighten your baked goods if you wish. Again, if you want to check that healthy baking chapter in my first book about professional baking, I recommend you do so. If you've enjoyed the episode today, hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to leave a review, I would greatly appreciate it. If you haven't picked up a copy of my most recent book, Baking with Success, it's available on Amazon and in bookshops worldwide. If you have any questions, head on over to bakingradio.com and leave me a message. I would love to answer some of your questions on air.